Welcome to my YouTube channel at Sci-Fi Tales Pules. Please subscribe, like, and share to support my channel. Ethan Carter walked through the long marble hall of the palace. The sound of his boots echoed as guards stood at attention. He had been called many times to battle, but this was different. Today he was called before the queen herself. The air felt heavy, and he could hear whispers from the nobles lined along the walls. They spoke of him as if he were more than a soldier. Some called him a hero. Others thought he was dangerous. Ethan kept his eyes straight, his face calm, though his heart carried the weight of every battle he had fought. At the end of the hall sat Queen Eleanor on her golden throne. She was tall, graceful, and her crown shone under the torchlight. By her side stood her daughter Clara, the young princess. Her silver gown flowed like water, and her eyes rested on Ethan with quiet strength. Many in the court already believed she had chosen him, and that soon he would stand not just as a soldier, but as the future prince. When Ethan reached the center of the chamber, he bowed deeply. The queen looked down at him with sharp eyes. The silence stretched until her voice cut through the hall. "Why do you reject my daughter?" she asked, her tone steady yet filled with hidden fire. The question struck through every whisper and left the court in silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The nobles stared at Ethan as if waiting for lightning to strike. Clara's face tightened with worry, her hands gripping the edge of her gown. Ethan's chest tightened. Had faced enemies in war without fear, but now every word he might say carried the weight of a kingdom. He had never asked for the princess's hand, never sought the throne, yet his silence had been taken as rejection. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes met Clara's for a brief moment, and then he turned back to the queen. The air between them grew tense, like a bowstring pulled too tight. His answer had not yet left his lips, but already the court leaned forward, waiting for the soldier to speak. Ethan stood in silence, and his thoughts drifted back to the years before the palace, before the wars. He was not born into wealth or power. His father was a farmer, his mother a woman who worked from sunrise to sunset to keep their small home alive. Ethan had grown up with calloused hands and a heart full of duty. He never dreamed he would one day stand before a queen or be spoken of as a match for a princess. When the wars began, he was only a boy, carried a wooden spear, then later a steel sword, and he marched into battles that broke stronger men. Saw friends fall beside him, and he carried their memory as a wound deeper than any blade. Each victory he earned was paid for with the lives of those he could not save. The court called him a hero, but in his own heart he carried only sorrow and guilt. This weight followed him now, standing in front of the queen. He had never rejected Clara out of pride. It was fear, a fear not for himself but for her. He knew the enemies he had made on bloody fields, and he knew those men still lived. If he were tied to the princess, she would bear the danger that followed him everywhere. The nobles around the chamber did not see this. They whispered to each other that Ethan's silence was arrogance. They thought he believed himself above the throne, or ungrateful for the honor offered to him. Their voices hissed through the hall like snakes, but Ethan kept his eyes on the queen. Clara's gaze stayed on him as well. She had seen him before in the gardens when he thought no one watched. She had seen the way he carried the weight of others on his shoulders. She knew he was not a man of empty pride, but a man of sacrifice. Still, the moment held him prisoner. To speak the truth would open his heart before the entire court. To remain silent would leave him judged as proud and unworthy. Ethan's lips parted, yet no words came. Inside him, the memory of fire, steel, and the cries of the fallen held him back. The queen's eyes narrowed. The chamber waited. Ethan knew his secret could not be hidden much longer. Clara stepped forward before her mother could speak again. The sound of her gown brushing the stone floor echoed through the silent chamber. Her voice, calm but steady, broke the heavy air. "Mother," she said, "you see his silence as rejection, but I see the truth. Ethan is not a man who hides behind pride. He carries a weight that none of us can see." The court gasped at her boldness. It was rare for the princess to speak so openly in front of the nobles, let alone challenge her own mother. Yet Clara's eyes held no fear. They stayed fixed on Ethan, who stood frozen, as if caught between duty and heart. Clara turned to him, her words softer, but filled with strength. "You think I do not know you, Ethan, but I have watched you for years. I have seen you in the gardens, when you thought no one cared. I have seen you at the memorial stones, standing alone in silence. You believe you are unworthy, but I know you are not. You are the bravest man I have ever known." Her words struck deeper than any sword he had faced. The chamber stirred. Some of the nobles muttered that she spoke with foolish emotion, but others grew quiet, moved by the honesty in her tone. Queen Eleanor sat back, her sharp gaze shifting between her daughter and the soldier. She was a woman of power, but even she could not ignore the fire in Clara's voice. Ethan lowered his eyes, his chest heavy with conflict. "Princess," he said slowly, "you do not understand the danger that follows me. To walk beside me is to carry the shadow of every enemy I have made. I could not forgive myself if that shadow ever touched you." Clara did not look away. Her voice rose above the whispers of the nobles. "Strength is not in crowns or titles. Strength is in the heart. Will not let fear decide my life. If I choose to stand with you, it is not out of duty, but out of love." The words fell over the chamber like thunder.
Ow!
The nobles shifted uneasily, for tradition had been challenged, and the heart of the kingdom trembled with change. Ethan felt his resolve begin to break, torn between his fear and the princess's faith. The hall erupted into voices as soon as Clara finished speaking. Some nobles shouted that she was blinded by emotion, while others whispered that her courage was greater than any tradition. The court was no longer united. Lines were drawn in whispers and frowns, and in sharp glares across the chamber. One noble, Lord Harrington, stepped forward with a proud voice. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing to the Queen, "this soldier insults your crown and your daughter. If the princess must marry, let her be joined to my son, a man of noble blood and true honor." His words stirred louder agreement from some of the nobles. They looked at Ethan as if he were nothing more than a common man, pretending to be more than he was. Ethan stood still, his face calm, though inside his heart burned. He wanted to answer, but the weight of his own fears still pressed down on him. The Queen raised her hand, and silence returned at once. Her eyes locked on Ethan. "I ask you again," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "Why do you reject my daughter? Speak the truth before this court." Ethan's breath grew heavy, could no longer hide behind silence. Slowly he lifted his head. His voice, low but clear, reached every corner of the chamber. "I do not reject her out of pride. I do not reject her out of disdain. I reject her because I fear the danger that follows me. Enemies remain from the wars I have fought. If I were bound to the princess, they would strike at her to strike at me. I could never bear that burden." Gasps moved through the nobles like wind. The meaning of his words spread quickly, and even those who hated him fell silent. It was not arrogance that guided him, but a painful devotion. Clara's eyes shone with quiet tears, not of sorrow but of pride. She reached for Ethan's hand, her voice steady. "And I will stand beside you, even in that danger. I will not let fear steal my choice." The Queen's lips pressed together. She had expected pride or denial, but instead she heard sacrifice. The hall held its breath, waiting for her judgment. The hall grew so quiet that even the crackle of the torches sounded loud. All eyes turned to Queen Eleanor. She sat upon her throne, her crown glimmering in the dim light, her gaze locked on Ethan. For a long moment, she said nothing. The weight of her silence pressed on every noble in the chamber. Ethan stood tall, though his heart pounded like a drum. He had spoken the truth, and there was nothing left to hide. Clara's hand remained in his, her grip firm, her presence giving him strength. The court waited, wondering if the Queen would see his words as honor or insult. At last, Queen Eleanor rose from her throne. The sound of her steps echoed as she came forward, her robes flowing behind her. She stopped just before Ethan and Clara, her face unreadable.
Ow.
Then her voice rang clear. "You have shocked me, soldier," she said. "I expected arrogance or denial, but instead, I found a heart that carries the burden of love in silence. You fear for my daughter's life, yet in that fear, you show your deepest devotion."
Ow.
Murmurs spread through the nobles, some bowing their heads, others frowning at her words. The Queen lifted her hand, and they fell silent again. "I will not force this union," she continued, her voice firm. "But know this, Ethan Carter. You have earned my respect. You have stood before me with honesty when many would have hidden behind lies. For that, you shall carry not only my protection, but my regard." Ethan bowed deeply, his chest heavy with relief. Clara turned to her mother, her eyes shining. "Then let me stand with him, mother, not as a command of the crown, but as my choice." The queen studied her daughter for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "So be it. The path you choose will not be easy, but it will be yours." The nobles stirred once more, but none dared speak against the queen's decision. Ethan and Clara stood together, side by side, the bond between them stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. The queen returned to her throne, her heart torn between duty and pride, yet she knew the kingdom had changed this day. Love and truth had spoken louder than tradition, and nothing would ever be the same. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.